Okay, welcome to the DSEP Northern Applied Hub's new live stream feature, which we'll be doing around this COVID-19 and the quarantine period, looking at how we can help you guys out in particular, mainly undergraduates and people looking to become aspiring sports psychology practitioners. Today, I have with me Richard Simpson.
Hello, thank you for having me, Adam.
That's right. That's good. Before we move on, one thing we've got to say, and our sympathies are with those who are affected by COVID-19, both physically and from a financial, economic point of view. The interview we're going to have today will have maybe some tips, and although we say utilize the opportunities available, we're not going to say take advantage of them, profiteer and anything like that. That's not what we've designed this stream for, but our hearts and our sympathies are for those who are affected by the coronavirus.
Absolutely, I echo what Adam's just said there. Absolutely. Hopefully this will help somewhat provide a bit of light relief to people wanting to have more information on sport and exercise psychology. Just to reiterate, and just kind of say my part in this, I'm sharing my experiences for once as the person being interviewed rather than doing the interviewing. So I'm usually one of the moderators for the DSEP Northern Applied Hub, but we collaboratively felt that I have a few experiences to hopefully offer to people, and I guess I'm being the lab rat, so to speak, for our new way of streaming this. So if this gets out, then we're obviously happy with the content. But I'm looking forward to hopefully sharing some of my insights into some of my experiences that we'll talk about today.
I think your insights and experiences will be highly valuable to any of our listeners and watchers here today. One thing to note, this will go out as a podcast with multiple of our other guests, blended into one special podcast we are putting on specially for you guys. If you could subscribe down below if you get any value from this. And the first question I really got to ask you, Richard, is how are you finding lockdown at the moment?
It's a very good question, and I think I'd be lying if I go and say immediately straight out that I am coping with it effectively, completely fine, because I think it's important in this day and age to be transparent. And what we do get a lot in this day and age, especially in the age of social media, is everyone's showing you their kind of positives and their highlight reel, so to speak, which is very good, which is obviously what you want to see. But obviously there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it has taken me, I think, some time to adapt to the new restrictions of lockdown put in place. I've had to kind of habitually almost create new routines. I've had to kind of isolate rooms off as that's my work room and that's my chill room, because obviously as we're working from home, I think the initial struggle for me, and I'm sure for some people, is getting that fine balance between what is where you relax and what is your work environment as well. And from a lot of people that I work with, senior lecturers and so on, it's one of their first routines, or I guess strategies, has been to find a room which is for work only. I think if I'd been working in my living room, for me, some people can do it, but for me, that would not have worked, because I think there'd be so many distractions out there. So I think what's been really key for me is identifying which are the distractions, and then kind of almost at the start coming up with an action plan in order to deal with the coronavirus. And that's not just for work-wise as well, but also from my own personal, mental, emotional, and physical health. Been making sure that I kind of prioritize when to go for walks, when to be in nature, when to exercise. So that's been really important. And I'm still learning every day, like as much as I've kind of outlined some strategies of how I'm going about coping things. It's under constant review. There's some days which are better than others, and I think that's key to also identify and recognize yourselves, is that there's going to be good and bad days. Days when you're almost fed up of being isolated, and was, as the government talks about, isolation fatigue and everything. We're all going to be able to. We're all going to have our bad times, and I think it's the fact that we're recognizing that is really important. And I think, from my perspective, certainly, as we experience a range of emotions, I think we've got to accept that there will be a range of emotions, and that's completely fine as well. That's certainly something I've been learning. When you're trying to kind of modify and recognize why you're feeling certain ways, it's important to recognize that sometimes you may feel low, and sometimes you will feel demotivated. And I think that's been the key part for me in this. And no, a good long question to start off with, Adam. Thank you. I'm sure we'll talk about it later as we go along. But
definitely. We'll definitely mention on to that, and especially what you mentioned, how that goes really into the well-being literature as well, when you look at things like gratitude and similar aspects of that. But likewise, we will talk about that moving on to our next or moving on to the next segment. One thing it would be good for our listeners and watchers to know is to get to understand you, I wouldn't say from a personal perspective, but get to understand how you got into sports psychology and your own sporting interests.
Yeah, no, of course. Another big question you asked there. No, thank you. So I guess I've always been very interested in sport. I think if I think about what my entry was into being fascinated into sport, it was playing football, as it is for a lot of young males, is getting involved with playing football. So I'd play like what we call it, the mini soccer at a young age. And you'd obviously some people would get, like a majority of boys my age would get really vested and interested in playing, well, usually it's your footballs or your rugbies or so on, as you were kind of nurtured into within an early age at school. And I played football at my local football club. I was really into it. I had my idols who I supported, and as most boys that age did, you wanted to be the next best football star, and that was me. And then I wanted to be the next David Beckham, who I think was my idol from a very young age, hence started to support Manchester United. You may be wondering why I'm now living in Leeds, and considering the stark contrast between Manchester and Leeds. But so I guess from that young age, I think, actually, now I think about it, being my first kind of denial as such was I was really vested into football and making it into a career in football from the age of 8. And then I had a good season. My manager had to put forward 3 players, I think, for Norwich City trials. And he didn't put forward me, and I was gutted. I kind of see his reasonings why now, but I think at the time I was like, well, what's going on? I was a main striker in the league, so I was one of the highest goal scorers in the league. And I didn't get selected for Norwich City trials. Looking back on it, I know I didn't, why, because you could only choose 3 positions, and there's a lot of other people in the team. So I think then I kind of my dreams of my short-lived dreams of being a footballer kind of were cut short there. But then my parents actually probably played a very big role in why I'm interested in sports psychology now. And I started to get really involved and interested about, I guess, mental performance, I guess your typical individual level psychological skills, and seeing that in action. So I moved across sports. I started playing a lot of badminton. My mum and dad, I have a lot to thank for that, and they got me into playing badminton. And specifically within the sport of badminton as individual sports, you really from an individual level can see kind of the mental skills being used there, the kind of self-talk, the anxiety reducing and stress reducing strategies. And I think from a young age, I was really interested in kind of the link between the use of mental skills, I guess, not necessarily mental skills, but the kind of mental part of your mental side of performance, not just your physical and technical sides. And that really started to fascinate me. And then from a young age, I think because I've always been quite structured, I kind of formulated a plan going forward. I was like, okay, I want to become a sports psychologist. So much so that through the years I have come across, I have made my own share of mistakes of the terms I've called myself. I think when I was quite young and naive within the undergraduate level, I called myself a trainee sports psychologist. And for those of you who don't know, that's a protected title. And so immediately from then on, I was like, no, I need to call myself aspiring. And because I still am an aspiring practitioner. So, I think I did struggle actually. I guess I say struggle. I got average, I'd say quite average grades with my GCSEs and A levels. Got into university, thankfully, on the dot. Identified Leeds Trinity University as the one I wanted to go to. More for the communal vibe. I didn't really have a sense of my own career there. I know I wanted it to be in sports psychology, but I just didn't know the pathway necessarily to get there. And had I known the pathway, I think my options would have possibly been quite different. So I chose to do sport and exercise science at Leeds Trinity University. At that point, you could specialize in what discipline of sports science. So I chose sports psychology. And I guess it kind of my interest in sports psychology grew from there. I remember one of the people who pulled me in, I guess, to sports psychology, Dr. John Perry, who was at Leeds Trinity at the time. I think he's over. I think it's at the University of Limerick now. I'm not too sure. It's definitely one of the universities in Ireland. I guess that's quite vague, but he was quite a big source of inspiration into getting involved. And I guess he kind of modeled my thoughts. I kind of modeled my own thoughts of sports psychology, I guess, on what he taught me. And there was many other good lecturers at Trinity from through the years who I learned a lot, especially Dr. Chris Rowley. I learned a lot on reflective practice. He started, I guess, my transition over to seeing the more qualitative, subjective, and kind of more lived experience side of psychology in general. We talk about in, I guess, any kind of practitioner literature, there's talks about maybe that kind of paradigm shift in some ways. How Richard Keegan describes it in his Being a Sports Psychologist book, he talks about the move from, his terms he used were a certinistic approach to more construalist sort of approach. So I guess moving as a practitioner or as someone aspiring to be a practitioner or as a trainee, kind of that through exposure to experience, that move from a practitioner-led kind of approach to a more client-led and putting the person first. I guess that's the buzzwords now within the last decade. It's like person-first approaches and everything. But I think through exposure to different experiences, I think throughout my university degree, I started to see a lot more to what sports psychology is and the potential there. So I used to have this kind of mindset that you could go, that kind of intervention mindset that you see someone has a problem, a sports psychologist will go in and he will fix it. At an undergraduate level, that was kind of my approach.
It's like a very medical approach, really, isn't it?
Yeah, very medical. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very medicalized approach. So, and then from there, I started to learn that it was a lot more, I guess, through my own experiences, because I had a placement with England badminton, very good placement in my undergraduate year. And I started to through shadowing the psychologist working there, and he was very, very experienced psychologist. And I remember sitting down with him and he was like, what do you know about psychology? So I told him this and he was like, yeah, great, good. And then he drew this whole diagram for me and just saying, this is what you're talking about. You're talking about pretty much one pillar of what psychology is all about, and that is psychological skills, because at the time that's what I thought psychology was all about, when in fact it's so much more than that. And I guess through experiences has kind of molded me into my career path. And I guess I've always had a desire to do well in whatever I do. So after my dreams from a young age of being in performance sport as a kind of athlete kind of died away, I started to really focus on wanting to help people, wanting to be kind of a consultant or a practitioner, and then also thinking about the ways in which I can really make an impact on the discipline. And this is what's kind of led me into right now engaging between a career within what's balancing teaching, research, and soon to be applied practice. So that's kind of my goals, is to kind of balance those three going forward. And again, those goals were really refined when I came to Leeds Beckett to do my master's. Some outstanding sport psychology, sport and exercise psychology department at Leeds Beckett, outstanding. And I think the second or third in general for SPEX Psychology in regards to like a subject and across the UK. I think. I mean, there's some other good universities out there. Don't get me wrong. You've got your Loughborough obviously topping the list, and then you've got Liverpool John Moores, but Leeds Beckett for me are. I don't just because I work there, I don't just kind of recommend them to people in the Leeds area. I'll go to Leeds Beckett. They're generally because of my own positive experiences. That's especially through the modules that I engage in, such as practicum, giving you kind of a ethical applied taste of practice. It's kind of encouraged me to really pursue the career that I want to do. I've given it quite a large intro, I guess, into my background, but a lot of those experiences have molded me. I think without some of those early rejections as a youngster, as a kid, I don't think I would be on the path I am today. So those rejections, those people there, most significant others there to support me, my experiences within sport, especially within badminton, the applied context placements I've had, those have been very useful. So not just working with Badminton England, but also working with British Athletics as well on the practicum module. So goodness, I've probably bored the viewers to sleep right now.
No, trust me, you haven't bored anyone to sleep.
But that's kind of, I guess, a bit of a context into my background anyways.
It's an interesting background. What I think many of our listeners would like to know: did you face any setbacks along your academic or professional career?
Yes, it depends. I guess what you define as a setback, almost, because I think some people would define it in certain different ways. Some of the setbacks I might share may not even be perceived as a setback by other people, but I think I'm almost embarrassed to say this because this won't seem like a setback to most people, but I think what was a really critical moment for me was actually towards the end of my undergraduate. I got a 2-1 in my degree, which to a lot of people, and I guess anyone really, any normal person, that would be great. Everyone would be happy with a 2-1 degree. But I missed out on the first, and I was quite gutted about it, to be honest. I was very disappointed. I remember feeling very disappointed about it because all year, I guess for most of my 3 years, I was aiming for that first class degree, and it just looks different on whatever applications you send to people.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and I think missing out by a few marks, I was quite gutted about it, and I think that was almost like a defining moment. Almost that it's not really a setback, so to speak, because the 2-1's still a very good degree and is still getting me places. But I just kind of looked upon that and it was a very big moment for me in regards to saying I'm going to do so much better. I'm going to prove myself wrong. And it was like a really big driver of kind of, I guess, determining how inspired I am today. And I think a bit of a family context, because my grandfather, who's sadly not with us today, had died well over nearly about 20 years ago. He was like almost a pioneer in his field. He was a professor at Strathclyde University in Scotland, and albeit within a completely different field. I've tried reading some of his papers and it's just alien to me. So I would never go anywhere near the fields of engineering that he engaged in. But I guess the fact that the impact that he made on his field, the communities he was on, and what he achieved, it's very much inspired me to do the same, albeit in a different field. So that was kind of like a reinforcing driver, along with different setbacks as well. So as well, I guess you could talk about it before my academic career. Didn't get into Norwich City trials. I had kind of county trials as well, because I was playing at a county level in county tournaments for badminton. Didn't get in because I remember at the county trial I got injured in the trial, playing in a really good game. I remember then I got injured. I think I did something to my hamstring, so that kind of ruined my chances of getting into county. But yeah, just defining moments, kind of. I guess you never like to say your parents are right, but my parents are always one of there's things happen for a reason, and that there's ways that you can kind of come out of it better. And it's always kind of the cliche thing you hear, but now looking back on it, knowing that they probably won't listen or watch to this, I can begrudgingly say that they were right. All the experiences that I have failed, or have had what I'd perceived to be setbacks, have only motivated me to do better. And I can't really explain why that is the case, but I think I've been very fortunate to kind of grow up in an environment which has encouraged resilience and nurtured resilience. So I guess for dealing with setbacks, I've had quite a few, and I guess in the academic context, you've got to, especially for those doing PhDs or looking to do PhDs or especially looking to get onto PhDs, because I'm on a PhD. I've been on a PhD since last February, but I spent a good year trying to get on a PhD. And that was there was a lot of setbacks in itself in regards to PhD applications. And my advice to anyone who's in that process right now, whether it's trying to get onto, it's easier to get onto masters, but if you're trying to get onto PhDs, you're going to have to go through, unless you're a very lucky minority, you're going to have to go through a few rejections, as I found out. And it's hard and tough at the time when you're convinced that you're a good candidate and you have references from people saying you should be a PhD student, and then they decide to choose a better candidate. It's in regards to the reflection process, it does take some time and some speaking to other people. I think some of the best rejections I've actually had were when people have actually called me on the phone to reject me. It's quite.
At least they haven't left you in the wide open debating to yourself. What?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I've had rejections before via email, and they've just said, due to the large number of candidates, we can't give you feedback, or
a standard template or something. So it's like, thank you for that, but at the same time, it's like I don't know what I can do with this.
I mean, one is I won't label there's two. I've got two examples of a good and a bad example. So the bad example was I had an interview at this institution. I had got what I felt were quite good vibes in regards to how I executed the interview quite effectively in my own eyes, and I think I got kind of good vibes from the panel as well, just from how they're responding and how positive they were, and they were nodding a lot. And that doesn't always tell you everything, but I do remember the process of trying to get feedback back. I kept kind of I kept emailing the director of research who would take time to get back to me, and I was saying, I was expecting like news of whether I've been accepted or not a week ago. What is happening? And he's saying, "Oh, we're having to delay it, but we will get back to you." Blah blah blah. I guess it was a good month later. Then I got some sort of administrative email saying you've been unsuccessful. And you ruminate about it, because you're kind of like, well, why have I been unsuccessful? You've gone to the lengths of kind of delaying it. I got through to the last 5, maybe. I think there was about 5, just maybe between 5 to 10 people who'd gone to interview. At least at that stage, I felt people were justified an explanation of why they didn't get the role. And I didn't feel, other than the whole jargon that we've talked about of there were stronger candidates out there. And it was like, okay, well, that doesn't give me anything to work on. Why are they stronger? What do I need to go develop? Do I need to go and do more CPD in certain areas. It's just not. Just wasn't that great of feedback and experience to engage in. Alternatively, the good example. Again, I won't outline the institution or the person, but I got a phone call from this person. Well, they intended to call me, and they called me several times, but for some reason, I think I was playing sport. They didn't pick up. But they eventually got hold of me and kind of explained to me that you've been unsuccessful for this PhD interview. You were a very strong candidate. And they said the usual stuff, but they also said, but I know this is quite generic, but we want to give you an option for further feedback of maybe directions of where you could go, look to improve yourself. And I think in this instance, the best feedback they gave me for that was, we felt you're a very strong candidate, blah, 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 blah. And then, but we feel there's a stronger topic for you out there. The kind of matching between the topic that I applied for, I think the topic was to do with kind of more kind of the exercise psych discipline, and I think I did kind of agree, because they said to me that they didn't feel it was like a very congruent fit, so to speak, and and it was one of the best feedbacks I reached, because it's just how personal they were and individualized, and ever since then, I have a lot of respect for that department and for the person who engaged in the feedbacks, who delivered that feedback to me. So
really good. Yeah. They gave you that feedback and pushed you on to an area that is stronger for you, because I can imagine many organizations wouldn't do that kind of thing. It's just like, yes, no, you were unsuccessful. Good luck for the future kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a balance between business efficiency and almost a kind of personal approach. Some organizations are better than others in getting a balance between that, certainly. So yeah.
So obviously you've done a little bit of applied work before you did your PhD. I think I've seen something with you to do with the Battleback publication to do with climbing.
Yeah.
And doing that work like that, how was that similar, or was it similar to in terms of its context and challenges, and compared to doing your master's and undergrad or other types of work? And how did that make you develop as a practitioner?
I will be honest, and I can give some better examples of applied experiences, but I think with Battleback, I was doing a lot of secondary analysis, but at the same time, and I guess that's also an important part of a practitioner, is the secondary analysis and kind of engaging in a research lens. So that's probably not the best example for me to give of an applied experience, but certainly I have been offered opportunities with Battleback beyond kind of the analysis stage, and is to kind of go along to one of their Battleback camps and get involved from a more kind of hands-on approach. And hopefully when I get the time with my scheduling, I'll be able to do that, because that'd be fantastic. But I think the best applied example, a more applied example I could probably give that's close to a practitioner, just to be discreet with people, and I'll talk about a bit more later, I'm sure, but I'm looking to start my BASES SEPA accreditation this year. I'll explain the kind of details of that later, but I'm not currently a trainee practitioner or anything, but what applied experiences I have been exposed to have not necessarily been within a consulting capacity, but I've been mirroring and learning the skills that a practitioner would potentially have to be efficient and learning in that regard. So from my research experiences, where I can kind of mirror the skills from an applied context, I have recently done quite a lot of work with UEFA. I won't detail too much of the finer details there, but it did involve.
That's understandable.
What it has involved with me is kind of getting involved with stakeholders from different countries, going out to said country and then engaging with with the people higher up within the organization, with some of the coaches. And from that, I think has probably been my closest to an applied experience, so to speak. So I learned quite a lot about engaging with organizations. And I think for sports psychologists, kind of that, how they find themselves within the organizational climate and how they're nested within it. There's been a lot of good research within it, how they integrate. Yeah, integrates the better word. How they integrate into their practice environment, how they form rapport, how they get a sense of the environment and the culture that they're in. And I had some brief exposures to that myself when I was going to these countries and getting used to their culture, how they operate, the symbols within the organization, the what's present to me, what do I see like imminently when I go into their headquarters, and then thinking outside of my own perspective, thinking, okay, so what would athletes, what would coaches, what would fans see if they go into these headquarters? What's kind of immediately in their plane of sight? What stands out to them? So I guess
fans kind of could get slightly ignored, you could say, in terms of that kind of research.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been a bit in sport management research about spectators' perceptions, which is just as important. But when you think about within the organization, kind of the pathway, the people who operating within the front lines of the organization, so your athletes, your coaches, your support staff, thinking about how they perceive the environment, but also how kind of, if you think about things such as diversity and you think about workplace efficiency, you think about well-being. So yeah, without going into too much finer details, those are the kind of things that I was I guess employed from a researcher perspective to go out there, observe, interview people, and from that sense, I was getting the ideas, not just from the formal interviews, but from the kind of not just from the one-to-ones, but through the informal chats as well, which is where I think a lot of sport and exercise psychologists will pick kind of findings out. It's not necessarily in the formalized interviews when people are structured and prepared to kind of deal with whoever they're speaking to. And I think the informal chats, I learned a lot about the culture and the kind of approaches and philosophies of people, especially within different countries. And I learned a lot about that. And I'm thankful in qualitative research that we use what we call field notes. So into our research, so we don't just take the findings from the interview, so to speak. We write up our field notes. We are reflexive and reflective, as I guess good practitioners should be from an applied context. I've always engaged within reflective practice. I think it's really important to understand my own feelings, emotions, how they tie into the context. How would I react differently in different contexts? How could I change my behavior and I guess my body language, and what I can control in different contexts? How can I be wary of what I cannot control, so then I can therefore regulate in my emotions a lot better if there's certain things in certain contexts that I can't really again be in control or manipulate. Then it's kind of controlling myself not to regulate effectively and not respond stressfully or in an inefficient way. There were times in my research with UEFA where I did kind of feel a lot of emotions in response to certain things that I observed. I wish I could give more specific examples, but
no, it's very understandable. Private disclosure is obviously needed in this situation regarding, especially with work with high body governing organisations like UEFA.
Yeah, and I think the point I was going to finish on there is regulating my emotions was a challenge in some regards, especially when speaking to some people and how their attitudes and opinions came across, which is what I was there to kind of capture and study. But I guess as a researcher, and I guess also as a practitioner, I think that kind of unconditional positive regard, that transparency, that way of kind of using your own emotions and empathy effectively, so being able to empathize with people on all levels, I think from a practitioner perspective, there's a bit more, from an applied perspective, there's a bit more flexibility in that, whilst then people have to kind of discount, well, practitioners often discount, I say discount, that's probably the wrong word, but often are wary of their own attitudes and emotions and their own background opinions and how they could perceive things. I think at the same time, with practitioners have that flexibility that they're really not getting on with someone, or they really can't getting in with someone, can't work effectively with someone, then that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad practitioner in my eyes. That just means that they just need to refer to someone on with a better, kind of a more complementary style to the client. And that does happen, I think, from people I've spoke to, that does happen. It just because you can't empathize, you can't get on a level with someone doesn't make you a bad practitioner. Obviously, there's reflective points that you take away from that. But sometimes there is just practitioners with different approaches and philosophies that will work better with some people. And also it's being wary as well that some people just don't see the appeal to psychology generally in sport. That's definitely the perception of psychology is definitely advanced and improved within sport and high performance contexts. That is just how we show our face as a discipline to those who don't really buy into it to begin with.
It's sport basis considers sports psychology, if you consider it as a Venn diagram with biomechanics, kinesiology one side, physiology, and then psychology. So it's one of the three, if you like, the three pillars of sports science. But likewise, it could be argued by some that it's not taken seriously as if it is one of the three major pillars of sports science.
And to be fair, there's a lot of practitioners I have met who have always of the assumption that there's only a minority of psychologists I've met who think that psychology is the biggest part of, I guess, that compromises of high performance. A lot of psychologists and a lot of experienced ones of that as well. A lot of experienced practitioners I've met to see psychology as an important cog in the wheel, but it's by no means the largest cog. Without it, it's hard for effective performance and functioning, and I guess well-being as well. So it is vital. It's a vital cog within the machine, but it's a small one as well. But it's a small cog that makes everything tick, makes everything function. Your main bases. So you've got your physiological, your technical, your techniques. So from a biomechanical performance analysis perspective as well, probably play a larger part in a lot of performance. And if you think about how big the pillars would be, then those would be bigger pillars. But as I've mentioned, psychology is just that important thing that brings everything together, connects everything together. And those people who have a lot of that, and that's kind of when it brings in the debate of how much people emphasize psychology when they're working with people. So when working for the clients, if they're kind of obviously bringing psychological concepts to the fore and kind of re-emphasizing psychology doesn't always kind of come across in a language that people will understand. If you kind of have that skills to integrate the importance of psychology, but within a holistic sense. So how does this psychology work when linked to kind of your physical training? How does it work when it linked to improving your technique? That's when I think psychological practice, I guess, from a performance perspective, is at its most effective when it is integrated with other approaches. And that's certainly what I've learned from a lot of practitioners anyways. And that was one of the first lessons I learned when I was on placement, and I was like, oh yeah, but what about these psychological skills? And then the experienced practitioner would turn around to me saying, do they necessarily need psychological skills training? They are high performance athletes who would have nurtured and learned some of these skills kind of subconsciously. High performance athletes. So kind of almost thinking, is intervention really needed on an individual level? Not necessarily. could it be needed on the environmental level, where you kind of manipulate kind of the training schedules, you think about the stakeholders involved and their behaviors towards the athlete. That was kind of a revolutionary discussion I had with the performance psychologist there at Badminton England. I learned so much just in that one discussion. I haven't really spoke with him since then, but I do come across him at a few events, and I will be thankful for him for that kind of. Wouldn't necessarily change from one. Wouldn't necessarily say from one discussion that my kind of views changed overnight, but I guess he was the. It's the term I'm looking for. He was the catalyst. He was the catalyst for that change in my perceptions of what psychology really is about within the sport and exercise context.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting what you said about psychology being a cog in the wheel, and I feel that many people probably have an over focus on their own areas of research and study, and maybe that does have an impact in how that can effectively help the clients in a multidisciplinary approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's about empowering all within the system. I say empowering, that's probably the wrong word as well. It's about really, because empowering implies that you're controlling of it. I guess it's all about contributing to a system and enhancing a system, which is not just about the athlete, so to speak. It is about the whole system. It's seeing where you can play your part to intervene, to contribute towards enhancing or maintaining kind of organizational functioning, well-being at an organizational and individual level. It's about allowing kind of whether it's at a director level, whether it's at a support staff and coaches level. It's about kind of the whole in high performance, maybe is the whole system around that revolves around the athlete, is making sure that like environmental and performance conditions are in place for that athlete to, is the buzzword that the EIS use a lot, to thrive in order to perform under pressure in a high performance context. And I think from a high performance perspective, the kind of those conditions, those environmental conditions, high performance conditions are very important. Obviously, there'll be psychologists don't just work within high performance. I think that's a bit of a stigma as well. Psychologists work at all different levels of performance and participation levels. But in the same regard, it's the kind of conditions around the participant in exercise or around the kind of athlete at whatever levels that's enabling them to live healthily, to perform effectively, and to quite importantly enjoy what they're engaging in, whether that's sport or running or just kind of overcoming barriers to exercise, for example.
What was the main difference you found from being a student to being a practitioner?
I'd use that practitioner term loosely. I will be a practitioner, just to clarify for people.
The difference between that and working into becoming a practitioner.
I can say a lot of things speculatively, and when I'm sure you'll interview many other people who will be able to give a bit more of a concise and valid answer. From my kind of brief experiences, my brief applied experiences, and also from being a student, you start to think we're quite lucky when we're students that we, in the most part, most institutions have conditions around us which enable us to have a kind of almost safety net. You have someone to fall back on if you need help. You have you'll have the lecturers who are there. You have your progress tutors. You have all the support mechanisms in place, and I think I've been quite fortunate as a student to have that. I think I'm anticipating, and I'm not sure if this isn't necessarily the case, when going into the real world of applied practice, there's not always going to be those conditions for you there, and sometimes you have to kind of work with what you have, and you when you get things wrong, you don't necessarily you will have your supervisor, but you don't necessarily have that fortune or kind of privilege to go back on and like, oh, I'll just review my work and I can submit it again. I think in some regards you're always self-reflecting and knowing where to improve yourself, but I think with regards to support mechanisms in psychology, it's not as well guarded as it is at being a student. So as a student, you always have that support. And whilst
So the
things
question really to ask then is, did university prepare you for the real world, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of the learning is still to come from me yet. And when I speak to other practitioners, they say that they've been prepared. I think it's a word, they've been somewhat prepared, but I think the real learning happens when you're doing your applied practice. You can have all the theories in the world of how things are going to work, but when you actually go out there into the real into different contexts, you start to learn that different things work better than others, and that not all the set. There's not a blanket. There's not necessarily a blanket approach to applied practice. There's kind of your set of resources and philosophies that you'll have. But quoting someone that I do follow on Twitter, who's an applied practitioner himself, a very experienced one from my observations. It depends is the phrase he uses a lot. And whilst I can't necessarily say that's my kind of experience of applied practice, I'm anticipating that I will somewhat have somewhat integrative, maybe pragmatic approach to applied practice. And I think from my previous experiences, I guess what I could call applied experiences working as a coach. So I've done quite a bit of badminton coaching myself. So in some regard, I've in my own domain of being a coach, I've been able to work closely with university student athletes. I say that in the loosest of terms, people who played badminton at the university level. I've been able to work with them and kind of teach them a few kind of integrated skills, not just solely focusing on mental skills, but for example, doing drills which puts them under pressure,
Right.
decision-making kind of drills, kind of working on a few psychological skills within my remit of being a coach. I think that's important, having that boundary and capacity and I guess coach expertise in order to do that.
So it improved your coaching. You reckon psychology helped improve your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not working as a coach can certainly help, and I think that kind of learning point of working with people and putting the person first, realizing why someone might not be performing well, and not just kind of. There was times when I had team talks with people, and like after the first set, that they lost the first set quite convincingly, and I wouldn't break down the performance. Simply, I wouldn't break down the performance at all because I know their capabilities. I know what they're capable of performing at what level. It would be simply a case of they've had, as a student as well, they've had simply a bad week. So everything's going wrong for them, and it's kind of like almost if you think about chaos theory, it's a chain of events. One leads to the other. And I think one of my coaching experiences.
Feminism.
Yeah, one of my coaching experiences was in that set, the doubles pair I was coaching, I think they've been completely taken apart in the first set, and they were beaten. I think it was to single figures, and then they just came up with me, and some of them were one of the blokes was just not having. I don't think he was having a good week at all. But I think an achievement in itself was just reflecting on it was my decision not to focus on what he was doing wrong in performance, but to focus on how he was feeling. And I was like, "Are you okay?" Well, I don't think I said, "Are you okay?" I think that would be the wrong part to say, but just giving him confidence. Trying to give him confidence in the bright aspects and giving a bit of perspective as well, because the pressure he put on himself in that game was that this mattered, so to speak. And I think giving him perspective in the game, what just kind of encouraging him to have confidence in what he's doing well and build upon that, and to see the perspective of this is one of few university games that you'll be playing in regard to the time you have at university. This is maybe your final year, so you have a few games left. I want you to go out there and enjoy yourself, and just enjoy the competitive experience and see what you can take from that. I don't think I said it like that. I said it a bit more effectively, kind of with knowing the student. I said it a bit more effectively, and I think in the next set, him and his partner went out with a lot more confidence, and they still lost the second set, but I was really proud of this kind of just how much they enjoyed it. And then I think even the kind of small audience we had watching, when they hit like a fantastic shot or played a fantastic rally, for example, those rallies when you think that they're going to lose this rally, and then they turn it around and they fight in the rally and they win the rally. And then just got everyone cheering for them. And they lost the set still, because I think the other pair were better. But it's just those little moments and really kind of accentuating the positive of what they've done well. And I'll always take that experiences as a coach of the fact that they, from a kind of person, from a client, I guess, client first, person first perspective, the fact that they managed to make something out of the match. And it's more than just the kind of outcome of performances of the experience they had during that game, the kind of momentum, the slight momentum shift where they did give the opponents a good game, but more importantly, they were enjoying themselves and they were thriving, so to speak. They were pushing themselves and they were enjoying themselves. They were laughing, and again, the enjoyment in the game. And I think I will always remember that, the fact that they enjoyed it. They got a lot of people to cheering them on, seeing that they're enjoying it as well. And even when they lost, there was still like that a round of applause. Is that was a really entertaining game. You gave us a good game to watch, and I always remember moments like that. And sometimes it's a lot more than just the outcome and the performance, which with a performance lens and high performance is understandable to see people kind of take that lens, but it's kind of encouraging people to kind of be more in the moment, to be more present and mindful, and to really make the most out of each experience. Not necessarily
REBT definitely helps with getting people to think about how things matter.
Rationalizing.
Yeah, that's the word.
Rationalizing emotions and behaviors, and absolutely. There's a lot of good scholars who know a lot more than me about REBT, who would be able to give a better account of what it is. But there's definitely dimensions of that which I take from that experience. And I think when I go and I have the scope to do my applied practice, so as soon as I get the all clear and I'm labelled as a trainee, then I'll be able to reach out to people again and work within a different domain, so to speak, and to work more from that mindset, not necessarily focusing on performance, so to speak. That's the coach's job, but to working from that perspective of their kind of a whole holistic development. I do remember like the last thing on that occasion as well was seeing them at the next training session and just seeing them so bit more upbeat, and you could tell at the few days after that game they were just there was a better vibe about them. Their just body language was better. They were having a lot of laughs, having a lot of banter, and it's just that whole experience as well. That's certainly one of my experiences which have molded, maybe molded how I will be as a practitioner, and how I work with clients. But I guess I'll be able to update you within a year or so about that. That's my kind of limited applied experience, so to speak.
So how did you find the transition from being a student to working in applied practice?
So just to clarify, I'm not yet working in applied practice.
Obviously not as a sports psychologist or a psychologist or in that kind of practice, but working from the transition from being a student to transitioning into work.
Into work, yeah. So what I can talk about is I'm a PhD student at Leeds Beckett University at the moment. So I've at the moment going down the kind of research teaching route a little bit at the moment, and I've been very fortunate to be a research assistant leading up to the PhD. So I've, pardon me, got a lot involved in a lot of different research activities, which have broadened my horizon, so to speak. I always had my kind of niche research interests, which would be kind of organizational psychology, coping, well-being, those different topics. Those are kind of my niche topics, so to speak. But yeah, the transition from being a student, I think almost towards the end of my master's, that transition was beginning even when I was a master's student. I was getting involved in different continual professional development events with the DSEP Northern Applied Hub. But I was also going to conferences with SciPag. I was going to the DSEP conferences. And there was a year difference. Well, there was a year gap between starting my PhD and finishing my master's. So within that year, I did feel the struggles, as I'm sure some people do, of kind of finding a job, of kind of being happy with myself, with kind of finding alignment with the career I wanted to go into. And there was definitely some struggles within that time, within that 1 year, with the rejections of getting onto PhDs, with kind of the uncertainty with being on the basis timeline. Before basis SEPA was announced, I didn't know what was happening, and there was that uncertainty as I'm not going on to PhDs. I can't start applied practice because I need to do some sort of conversion, which is what I have been doing. I've been doing this Open University module, which is so if we talk about it later, is a requisite for bases. So I have been doing that, and that there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of kind of trying to find the positives from everything. And I think what I've been quite lucky in the regard is having a good supportive circle around me with different layers. So obviously you have your personal layer, your family, your significant others, so on and so forth. I was also very lucky to have, I guess, that kind of career support circle. So I wouldn't blame them, but I guess I kind of see myself as having two supervisors / mentors who if I have a academic issue, I guess, or a related issue to my career, I will go to them. And I guess they've got sick of me through the last few years of sending them all the emails and everything, but they have been very kind of influential on helping me get to where I am at the moment. In kind of encouraging me to keep digging and to keep working hard and getting me onto the opportunities and helping me seek out opportunities that I can do in the meantime to develop my CPD, helping me see perspective to things, and just being available for discussions. I think it's very easy for lecturers when you've when a student is no longer at the university, it's very easy for for lecturers to kind of not prioritize them, because obviously they've got to prioritize their students that are at that university. I think throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to have, whether it's through at Leeds Trinity or at Leeds Beckett, to have lecturers who have been like my teachers and my progress tutors and mentors, to be available in supporting me, because it would have been very easy for them just to kind of like, right, I'm done with that student, next student sort of thing, as
a conveyor belt. One comes along, good, go, next one.
Kind of that brutal approach. But I think it's always, I've seen some recent research recently about mentors, I think within MBA, and there's a bit of a different context, but it was talking about the kind of similarities between the kind of, I think they looked at MBA All-Stars, but they were looking at the kind of similarities of the MBA All-Stars and kind of what got them to that point. And the key similarity was the mentors they had from within their development, was that having that mentor supporting them along the way. And I'm obviously not going to get to a level of an MBA All-Star or equivalent, but I think the fact that I've been quite lucky to have that support mechanisms throughout my career so far, and encouraging me to in what I can do. I think the most recent advice I've had from one of my mentors is think trust in the process. You've got everything you need to get to where you want to be. That quite resonates with me. I know it could be quite cliched, with the whole trust in the process thing. But the fact it was like the encouragement and reassurance of you've got everything you need to get where you want to be. And for me, that just shows good mentoring. It just shows that encouragement and reassurance and that their constant support, even when I was not a registered student. And then even then, that's kind of their support and confidence in me has been a source of confidence for me going forward. So yeah, and it's definitely molded how I act as well. Being a part-time lecturer at Leeds Beckett, I've kind of molded myself based off the experiences I've had from them as mentors. So I try and be as transparent and responsive to students wherever I can. I think I've actually been helping a student from a different institution on an assignment recently. Not obviously writing it for them, but they came to me saying, "Hey, you came in. We met recently. I know you're not a lecturer at my university, but would you be able to give me some support?" Now, just to kind of disclaimer, I'm not saying all lecturers should do this. Certainly, if I become a full-time lecturer, I'll have a lot on my plate that I would definitely not be doing that. But yeah,
you get people's dissertations coming through your post now.
Yeah,
through the letterbox.
That's probably where I draw the line, isn't it? But yeah, I think in regards to kind of they asking me about certain points. So, you talked about this, and when we last saw, could you discuss that a bit further? And been helping people understand topics, not necessarily write assignments, but understand topics a bit further. And yeah, obviously, as I advance my career, I won't necessarily be able to do that, but at the same time, it's still that kind of underlying approach that I have to helping people and to supporting people. It's just kind of been molded, I guess, through my experiences in sport and exercise psychology.
So we're now entering the meat, if you like, of the interview questions, and a lot of students have been getting in touch with us, and we've obviously done our research around the area as well, asking ways about what could they do during the quarantine, what they could do after the quarantine and after this lockdown to improve CPD or other similar processes. Before we move into that area, I think it would be interesting for interesting from our listeners' point of view. What were your thoughts and feelings when you first learned that the UK would go into a lockdown?
I personally wasn't surprised. There was a lot of people I know within my circle who were like, "Oh no, this is ruining a lot." But I did feel, I guess, when I was going abroad, like recently when I was going abroad to the different countries, there was people like coronavirus was kind of was present in some areas. People were like in certain countries were wearing masks already. So this is before it came to the UK, and I was like, "It's coming, it's on its way." And I do feel that. I think at first I was skeptical a little bit, as a lot of people were. I was skeptical because I didn't know what sources to rely on, what sources were accurate with regards to what the tabloids and the media put out there. Even sometimes with the BBC, not 100% sure whether it's trustworthy or not.
Like the utilised the Daily Mail, for instance, said that you could get it through feces, and that's obviously not the case. That's not very good research.
Yeah, I think what I was really reassured about when this happened was immediately when the first conferences were happening on it about dealing with the response to the coronavirus and the lockdown. At the fore of it were CEOs and chief scientists and people from who were on Cobra. And that did restore a lot of confidence for me. And that you can have a lot of different opinions about politicians, but for me, my opinion is, as much as science has kind of got different debates and everything, it's as much a reliable source in politics as the science. So I've always been a big advocate for backing the science, for backing arguments that come and for strong arguments that are posed to demonstrate why we do certain things. I think frustration was a key theme for me when people weren't taking the lockdown seriously, especially when scientists, and very commendable scientists, were some arguing that we should have gone on lockdown earlier. And we're starting to see some evidence now of that, of the fact that the countries that went on lockdown earlier are now benefiting from it. So you've got your Germany, Australia, the politicians are going to be the scapegoats, which I guess is what they're used to being anyway. So I'm glad no one's really criticized beyond the scope of science. It's not mainly kind of criticized the characters of the scientists so far, other than their appearances, which I think is bang out of order. That's quite a colloquial way of saying it, but I have utmost respect for the scientists who are working hard every day to establish plans and strategies and advice and everything. And I've always liked the fact that scientists, or some sort of scientists, have been on the panels when doing the interviews. I think I have had to restrict myself to the news. And I think for anyone, that's a good piece of advice, because I think is a big form of stress, the coronavirus at the moment, not just having it, right, which obviously it would be, but actually the whole discussing the topic about it. I did notice from a personal perspective that was starting to affect me. So I think my initial reaction was, from a personal perspective, I want to know when I can next see family, but from a kind of academic perspective, I could understand it. I definitely knew why it was appropriate to go into lockdown, and I guess it just made it even more frustrating when you see people who, I guess because they're just different backgrounds to me, but not respecting the lockdown. So when I go on my hour walk I guess it's around, that's the guide, is around an hour. I'd go on my exercise and go for a walk with my other half, and then we'd see groups of 10 people meeting up. I've seen videos on social media where I've had to restrict myself to social media a little bit. I've seen videos on social media of people having parties, of people kind of almost not taking it seriously, and I think that's what's angered me the most. And I've had to kind of teach myself that, Richard, that's out of your control. Don't expose yourself to that if you know it's going to frustrate you. So, and it's taken me a bit of a time to kind of readapt that approach. But that was I guess my imminent response to it.
So to be fair to say, you are being selective over the media in which you do consume.
Yes, and I'm still learning with that as well. I can't say I perfected it yet. But absolutely, I'm very selective with the sources I read. I think even my other half has adopted the same thing. We try and avoid tabloids where possible. I think it's a kind of trial process at the moment, but what we're trying to do is, because we have Amazon Echo, we'll maybe ask each day, like, Alexa, update us on the coronavirus, just to get the kind of headline news about it, if there is any. And sometimes I get notifications and texts on my phone saying this is what's happening, this and this. But I think I'm trying to get towards more doing that and focusing on other important things, on my own personal growth, rather than what I cannot influence and what I can't control.
Talking about personal growth, what are you doing during, or what would you recommend to anyone during the lockdown in order to help with that personal growth?
A lot of the things I will be saying, I probably would recommend, have been recommended elsewhere. There's a lot of sources out there about the things you can do, the different terms you can do, whether that's discovering, that's kind of finding new things to try out, whether it's cooking, whether it's playing with Lego, but different kind of creative kind of tasks. That's not always people's cup of tea, but I think it's doing things, creating a structure and a routine is really important. So and kind of I think planning ahead of things you're going to do each day, having a structure and a routine, doing things maybe which test and challenge you. So whether that's doing a run, whether that's working for a certain amount of time, or setting yourself a certain amount of words to get completed. It's fun. I think the most important thing is your routine and structure, and focusing things on one day or one day at a time, and not when there's going to be an end point, but thinking of things that you can look forward to. So whether that, for example, me and my partner, when it's when our pay packages come in, we kind of think about, okay, so what are we going to purchase from this online website? What are we going to put towards our savings? What are we going to do? What are we going to plan to do when restrictions are fully lifted? Just kind of planning ahead and thinking of things to look forward to.
It's like giving yourself that exit strategy, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think with the exit strategy, some of it would imply that there's an endpoint, but I think it's finding things to focus on, which can kind of take your engagement, so to speak. That's quite vague, but I think putting priorities on things which make you healthy and and with that, and that can be a number of different things. So I think making the most of your 1 hour of exercise as well. I say exercise or being outside. It doesn't necessarily have to be exercise. One thing I found quite relatable to is when I'm outside in nature and I just really hone my senses. So be mindful. So I think about what I can see, what I can smell, what I can hear, and just being kind of present in the present moment. So all those things I've kind of what some people may think that's the sort of thing you come across in yoga and breathing exercises and sort of thing. But it's the sort of thing with just making yourself present and just not thinking ahead necessarily. Sometimes it's good to do that, but I don't feel it's something you should ruminate on. Not looking back on things, but just kind of, it's healthy to be in the present moment, to think about your environment around you, being present in nature. I've been quite lucky that I live in an area where I can access the dales and the moors, like they're quite local to me. So going on walks and being there and just kind of keeping your minds on what you can control. I know that's very cliche. It's probably one of the main sports psych cliches is controlling the controllables. But I think being able to push yourself, so accomplish something each day, no matter how challenging it is, whether it's a small feat, you writing checklists of things that you're going to do each day. Something I put in my diary, I put today I'm going to make progress on getting this done. I'm going to go on a longer walk today. I'm going to even attempt cardio. I'm going to push myself a little bit, but I'm also going to have things inside my comfort zone as well. On the BPS, to probably articulate what I've been describing a lot better, there's on the BPS DSEP Twitter page and Instagram as well. They shared a good article about I think it was more on what athletes can do to enhance their well-being, but from reading it, it's what a lot of people can learn from it as well. So as a little mini plug to DSEP, definitely check that out. I think it's like a demographic kind of poster on athlete well-being, but and it's very useful for practitioners working with the athletes, but I think for anyone looking to look after themselves during the pandemic, it's a lot of relatable points set up, some of which I've highlighted.
I think it was really interesting what you said about waking up and getting a routine, and you find many people's general routine of not necessarily 9 to 5, but you wake up, you go to work, you go to university, you train, whatever that routine is, and then you come home again. And that's kind of been shaken up because you're at home all the time and there's nothing you can't really go, let's say, I'm going to mix it up and go to the pub today while I got off, because the pub's not open. And I think that's really interesting how you said utilizing routines to help with you through your day and utilize it as for your own mental well-being. There's a lot of, not necessarily research, but there's a lot of publicity around about having morning routines in particular. A lot of people saying wake up at 5 o'clock and you'll get more done and be happier, live longer, and I don't know, whatever else.
Like the Rock style.
Yeah.
There's another actor as well. He has a ridiculous timetable. I can't remember his name. He went viral for it. I can't remember. Oh, Matt Damon. Was it Matt Damon? Or was it
Right.
Matt Damon? I can't remember. Some actor like that. He has a ridiculous schedule. He like wakes up at 3, has breakfast like at 3:30, and goes to he has like 4 gym sessions or during the day or so. He's got a ridiculous schedule. But
depends what role he's preparing for, I suppose.
Yeah, and
300 type role, then I can understand it. But
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think for me, what I've really missed is the travel home from work.
Right.
So I think that's been a key reflection point, because I would finish work at around 6, half 6. I would then get the bus home. But it was that having that headphones in and that reflection moment of kind of winding down. That's something I've definitely missed, and I think as a way of replacing it, when I finish work each day, me and my partner, or whether it's just me by myself, will go for a walk, and that kind of replaces that winding down period, because it would take me about 50 minutes to get home from work, and in that 50 minutes, I'd either listen to music, it was me time almost. It was kind of time to yourself, to kind of a reflective period. And now obviously being stuck at home, I've really missed that, because I think that was a vital part of, I guess, of routine, of structure, of kind of regulating myself. I've almost like, it's important to like vital things like that, not in whatever means and ways they come across. It's important to have replacements for that. And going on walks at the end of each day, I'll go out for my half an hour or hour exercise or outside walk. And that's then if I go by myself, I'll put my headphones in and I'll almost try and mimic that effect. So having that time to yourself, if you're living with someone, having time to yourself in that regard is important. I think also, if you are by yourself, the reverse is just as important. So connecting with people, so having within your routine and structure kind of time at whatever point to connect with people. So at the end of each day, you are going to Skype or Zoom call one of your friends, one of your kind of people you work in a group with at university, your family, your coach, maybe if you're an athlete. Just having a set structure of, one, when you're going to connect with people, or two, if you are connected with people in the household, of giving your time to yourself. I think finding the balance between that and trying to equalize your own context in that regard, to kind of time to think to yourself, and then also time to share your thoughts. I think from my experience, that's quite important. Obviously, it's different contexts. So some people may be alone in this time, and some people may be with people. But I think it's important to be wary of your space, of your whether you're ruminating too much in your head, if you're being by yourself for too long, or whether you've just need contrasting that time to yourself, or you just want to connect with people. And I think taking both points into account is important. Is really important.
So it's very good what you said about the structures involved. It's important in setting a routine and getting that, having an important of a routine during the day. What I would like to, or many of our listeners would probably like to know, is how has the lockdown affected your work professionally?
It's definitely been an adjustment period, and I have to say I've been a lot luckier than most, because there's people out there who have been losing their jobs, who've had to go on furlough, who've had to they've had to take a pay cut, or so on and so forth. So I think when I speak about this, when I speak about my restrictions, I've just had to firstly point out that I'm quite one of the fortunate few. I say few, I'm one of the fortunate ones, in that I'm in quite a flexible role and a flexible job. So I'm quite protected in that regard as a PhD student and part-time lecturer and research assistant as well. I've got things to keep me going. I think from my own perspective, from a minor point, I think the transition to doing a lot of CPD webinars has taken a bit of use to, but that's one thing that I have been, to replace that CPD that I've been missing out on. Engaging in a lot of webinars has really helped. kind of looking at things where I can expand myself. I do a lot of Skype, Teams, and Zoom calls, with just the nature of my roles, whether that's working with my line manager or my supervisors. I have a lot of exposure to that. But also, I think from day to day, it's literally, as I spoke about earlier, having that room for work. But sometimes we'll work a 9 to 6, 6 day. Sometimes I think within this unprecedented circumstances, I do try to protect myself sometimes. So if it's a day where I don't have a lot of work, I will say, you know what, I've worked hard enough on other days. I'm going to finish at 4 or 3:30. Give myself that little bit of break and leeway, which I think typically, like, if outside these circumstances I wouldn't do, I'd be like, that's for the weekend. But in these circumstances, it's important to have that extra layer of protection. So I've been quite fortunate, as I mentioned, to have that flexibility. So yeah, I think all things considered, even though it has taken me my own time to adjust, I've managed to get there, and I'm still reflecting each day about how to improve or make the most of my circumstances, and see what I can learn as well within these circumstances. So, like, it won't necessarily be forever, these circumstances. I anticipate that social distancing of some regard will need to happen for quite a long while. Not necessarily restrictions, but from my own opinion and kind of through speaking to others, there will be social distancing in place. Who knows when I'll next be in my workplace, to be honest, because I don't think it's a necessity necessarily for me to be in the workplace, like in my environment. So at Leeds Beckett, I can quite happily and easily work from home.
Do you think that will change your work for the future? What people are learning to, or the organisations are learning during this lockdown?
I think, to be fair, I know we speak about adapting to a new normal, but once, maybe within the next year or so, I think there'll be a lot of kind of shifts towards online technology and webinars and so on, because webinars are very accessible. I do hope that we do go back to some sort of person-to-person contact, because I think I do look forward to my next kind of meetings that are in person, because it's just, you can't replace that person-to-person engagement. So I do look forward to that, but at the same time, I think within my roles, other than maybe we've transitioned teaching and lecturing quite easily. So we've been doing a lot of via email and via Zoom call and Skype for Business and so on. So that's quite easily adaptable. But yeah, I can see myself working from home for quite a long while. And I think the PhD allows that. And I think also my research allows that, as well as I'm doing a lot of desk-based work. I think when I start my accreditation, that's when I will start to worry about what I can and can't do. So in regards to kind of integrating and getting clients, it's always when you want to engage in the intake meeting, it's always more ideal to do it in person. Or from my perspective anyway. Before then, maybe thinking about engaging in online meetings and Skype calls, FaceTimes, or whatever. So yeah, I'm quite comfortable in a lot of regards, but at the same time, it's still challenges. There's still plenty of challenges with my role, and for those who engage within PhDs, will definitely know how stressful and challenging it is. Not necessarily the difficulty of the task, because when we've been trained as research students from our masters, we're well prepared for like executing the research skills, but it's the demand. It's like how much you have to do, which is why breaking things down and using routine and writing checklists are very important to kind of monitor your work. But I'm sure professional doctorates and PhD students could definitely vouch, saying how demanding and work-consuming doctorate level, I guess, research is. And I think adjusting to that and protecting your own well-being is very important, especially for doctoral students, and also for trainee psychologists as well, who so when engaging, from what people tell me and from what I'm expecting as well, engaging within accreditation is almost like a doctorate level in itself. So getting accreditation, you still have to engage within projects and research projects to kind of showcase your work. And produce quite large scale documents as well. So I have that challenges ahead of me as well. So for some reason, I've decided that when I start my basis SEPA, I'm going to do it at the same time as my PhD. Obviously, professional doctorates are literally doing that in, I know there's a lot of professional doctorate programs, whether that's at Liverpool, John Moores, Portsmouth, I think it's New York, at Leeds Beckett as well, in which they do kind of combine their applied work.
Is that a common route to go down, to do it both at the same time?
I think it's becoming ever so more popular. So I'm sure if you'll talk to quite a few professional doctorates from the UK, that is becoming quite a bit more of an efficient approach, I'd say. So people can then simultaneously do their accreditation and also get doctorate level accreditation as well. So obviously it's like a PhD accreditation in one. In hindsight, I could probably have engaged in something like that. And I do reflect back on it. I think for a long while I was looking for fully funded opportunities, and now I've come into a point where I can do self-funding. So challenges do vary with your kind of conditions behind it. So I think self-funded and full-funded students will have similar and different kind of experiences and backgrounds with how they're experiencing such things. But yeah, I know professional doctorates are becoming quite a bit more popular. Usually people who do start a PhD before accreditation or vice versa is usually because of their thoughts and their capabilities and whether they could do both at the same time. And I started my PhD because simply a lot of professional doctorates have that BPS requisite. So you need to be on a BPS accredited route, so you need to have the what's called GPC, so graduate basis for chartered membership. So you would have needed to have done a undergraduate in a BPS accredited undergraduate, basically in BPS accredited degree, which I didn't. I did a sport and exercise science degree. So I've had to go through the conversion process, in which there's two ways from my knowledge. So you could either do a Master by Science conversion course, which I know a few people have done, or now that Basis SEPA has opened up, they've given an opportunity to do a one-off module with the Open University, which I'm coming towards the end of, which is pretty much the equivalent of a level 5 module. It's quite, for those who've done a master's before, it's very straightforward. That's what I'm finding. There's people who are lecturers who are doing this module, and it's kind of almost, when you think about it, it's a requisite for
it's surreal, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there's people within my what we call it cluster forum, or my cluster group, my tutor group. Basically, I'm in a tutor group with lecturers who got their PhD years ago, but for accreditation processes, they're having to do a level 5 module in which they're being taught by people they could probably teach themselves. So and that's definitely quite interesting. But I think one thing that a lot of people who are looking to get onto a PhD or looking to get onto accreditation, you've got to weigh up what's best for you. So for me, it was best to do a PhD and then accreditation down the line because of my circumstance of not being BPS accredited. But thankfully, the people at Bases have been working hard to get a route to HCPC, and but there needs to be some sort of form of underpinning psychology, which is what I've been doing the level 5 module for. And once I have that, I'm then HCPC worthy, I guess, or I can then go down the training route and use the title of sport and exercise psychologist. So yeah, I'm on the basis SEPA route, which a few people are on. For a lot of people, I guess a majority of people will be coming from a BPS perspective, so they would have done a psychology or sports psychology degree, and then would have been able to go straight on to a master's and then accreditation. I wish I had that sort of linear route, but I guess all things happen for a reason, as they say. So yeah, there's different ways you can do it, and there's also people who do the international route as well, which I'm sure someone will talk about that in a bit more detail in the coming weeks. So there's the kind of different approaches to practice, which have been outlined quite effectively, which you can find on YouTube. The different approaches to or different accreditation routes, so to speak. I know if you go on the BASES website, on the SEPA page, Professor Richard Farrell outlines the BASES route very effectively, probably a bit better than I have done. Talks about the different requisites, talks about the people who have some sort of accreditation to begin with, what they need to do to become re-accredited. For the people who are in my position, who did sport and exercise science, then did a master's in sport and exercise psychology, you'll need to do the route I've done, which is do the Open Uni course. And also there's different considerations you need to take into account, like such as finances and so on. So that's always important to consider, of course.
What we will do is we will, even though this is a BPS production, we will link that down below what Richard said on the BASES website, and we'll have any other resources available down below in the sections down below. What we're going to was there any threat or challenge to your professional work that the quarantine threw up?
I think with the main threats, I think would come from firstly my own personal perceptions of the pandemic, as I outlined earlier, and how I controlled myself and how I got myself into a routine, which fortunately I did.
Did you feel a bit lost when you went to quarantine?
A little bit, yeah. I'd say a little bit, not completely. I always had some sort of guiding principle or support around me, but yeah, and I think it's natural to, and I think I just highlight that if you feel lost now or if you did, that's not like an uncommon kind of feeling. I think it's important to kind of rationalize all the emotions you feel as a result of the pandemic. If you're feeling scared, if you're feeling anxious and sad, that's not uncommon. You shouldn't be kind of beating yourself up for feeling like that, or kind of ruminating about feeling like that. I think that's very key to kind of recognize that it's normal is quite a vague word, but it's quite common to react in that way. And so, yeah, I would say I did feel lost at times. There's always times in regard to any stressor when you're appraising it, that you will feel quite uncertain. So it's kind of that process of navigating your way through that uncertainty, which is important. I think one of the main challenges as well was it's with some of the things that I can't control. So obviously coronavirus being one of them, but also the people I work with around me. So my supervisors, my kind of network around me, they have their own challenges that they're facing, and they've been like brilliant. So I'm not questioning that at all. I've been very lucky to have a good support network around me. But I think one of the challenges I've come across, not with my supervisors, but from people I've needed to be in contact with, and they're obviously going through their own challenges with their own workload and everything, which I'm been having to keep reminding myself of that. But I think one of the barriers is that people have different capabilities when it comes to online work and when it comes to responding to emails. Obviously, some people understandably are a lot better face to face, and that's fair enough. But I think some people are taking longer to adapt to the online version than others, which is completely fine as well, because we all work at our own rate. yeah, I think that's kind of been an obstacle for me with regards to getting in contact with people and trying to understand that they work in different ways and they're facing different challenges, and it's important to be reflective about that as well. And I think that's a kind of a new perspective that I'm almost doing to combat that challenge and I wouldn't really call it a threat, but combat that challenge of not being able to control other people, obviously, but just be wary that
do you feel that it's when they're working, their work is more directed rather than an indirect way of working? So what I mean by that is, here's your set structure, this is what we expect of you during the day, whereas indirect would be, I set my own structure, I'm like my own boss, I can work remotely, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's things that I also need to be aware of as well. Being quite transparent about it, but especially I think it's a lot easier in person when you can knock on people's offices and everything. But I think for me, an uncertainty has been, you don't want to overwhelm people, but at the same time, how do you contact people? Because like with a lot of people I know, you can, if you kind of knock on their door, you go speak to them for like a few minutes, and that's a lot accessible. It's very easy because you can just ask one question and say, "Oh yeah, that's fine, thank you." With it's a lot more difficult, I think, to engage in that kind of level of small talk in online, because the main ways of formally connecting with people online is via email. If you want to touch base quickly with something, but then their whole they will incorporate that into their whole process of getting through their emails. So just kind of touching on one, like dropping a line and say, I just need this question answered, it will still sometimes with certain people take a bit of time for them to get back to you. And I think for me that has been a frustration, definitely, but it's one I've recognized, and it's one I've rationalized a bit better through the weeks that I've kind of experienced it. It's just realizing that people work at their own pace and have their own challenges and capabilities. And obviously, there's certain ways that people can contact with people, but in a professional setting, I don't feel that, unless it's kind of the expectation is agreed upon, texting people within my line of work is not usually appropriate. It's usually like email worthy, because then you're kind of blurring the lines between personal and professional life. So it takes clear expectations in order to be comfortable with that.
Do you have like a form of a chat structure? Like, I don't mean to say like personal WhatsApps or anything like that, but a way where you can send an instant message and it's still professional rather than going through the email route.
I think Skype for Business takes that form almost. You can do that with Skype for Business, which a lot of staff at Leeds Beckett use. So we have some sort of, that's our kind of instant messaging, so to speak. But it's kind of almost the expectations you have with people who, you know, it can be quite blurred and difficult. So I think what I have been doing with a few people is setting expectations. So there's people there's some people I meet with monthly or every 2 weeks, and there's people who are quite flexible and who've said to me, look, just drop me an email and we'll arrange to speak, or so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it comes back to expectations with people at the end of the day. But that's definitely been my challenge, and I can definitely sympathize with students who are trying to get in contact with, whether it's with their dissertation supervisors or getting in contact with a progress tutor. It can be a frustration. I can understand from their perspective how difficult and annoying it will be, and it's only natural for them to feel such feelings. And I think a very good reflexive lecturer or practitioner will understand that. But it's kind of managing your own workload. You can't control other people necessarily, so it's doing what you can do in the meantime leading up to that. Yeah, I guess that's the main challenge.
Do you prefer to work remotely, or do you prefer to be actually inside the university working?
Ironically, I think I've probably got more work done working in isolation because I have no distractions around me. But on the other hand, for PhD students especially who are in an office with other people, it's very healthy So having that kind of social well-being and of people who you can rant to, of people you can speak with, people you can go to lunch with. I do definitely miss that part. And I just do find it ironic that in some areas I have been a lot more productive through kind of waking up, having breakfast, not having that 50-minute like bus journey, so to speak, and just being able to go to my desk and work, and then work all the way through till lunch, and then work all the way through to the evening. So I've been very fortunate with that. And I have been able to get quite a few milestones completed.
That's good to hear.
But I think, again, contrastingly, as much as I have done that, it's important for people to realise that they can give time to themselves in response to these circumstances. So I would not encourage you necessarily overworking unless you feel comfortable with doing so. I think it's easy for people to put a lot of pressure upon themselves to catch up with things, or
you're going to get people who are going to say, I need to be productive, and sometimes being not productive is also can be healthy potentially. That's actually sometimes not working, if you like, is productive because it's good for your mental health and well-being. So you could argue that point. Alternatively,
it declutters your mind. Absolutely, being away from the work, it gives you kind of that refined focus when you go back to it. And it's also, like you mentioned, good for your health and well-being as well.
It's different things like Pomodoro and other different strategies that you could potentially use. In terms of working, how did you adapt to being in isolation?
So I think in regards to work, I think making like a really functional, setting out my desk and kind of realizing and kind of setting aside and structuring when I'm doing certain pieces of work. I do that usually normally anyway, but I do that in regard to how my days would be working. So on a certain day would be my research day, on another day would be my PhD, so another day would be allocated to teaching. But generally, I think with regards to strategies for working from home, is like things such as kind of structuring my day. I think checklisting is a very important thing as well. Keeping one thing I haven't mentioned, I was actually speaking to my own brother about this, keeping a activity log. So with CPD as well, when you do online webinars, is noting down that, maybe writing a short reflection on what you've learned, and then just kind of keeping log of your activities and what you've engaged in, because then when you can demonstrate that when you go towards applications, and it gives you good that evidence as well. And it's also a good way of identifying kind of almost like a needs analysis of what you need to do to improve. So I think specifically for people going towards a certain career, or applying for PhDs or training, or trainee status, it's identifying what you've been exposed to and what you haven't been. So what's your competencies, what's your skills, what's your knowledge, and knowing where you can kind of improve that. That might be through a webinar you join. I think from an informal point, it might be from a YouTube video you watch. Might be from a book you read. So I guess I'm kind of...
it's fine. You can do as many plugs as you like on there.
I'm plugging his book, actually. I put it on Twitter, but...
there won't be any Amazon affiliate links down below, but...
no, the organizational psychology of sport. I'm making a lot of notes on that. Thanks. That's a good read, especially for my own PhD, but I set aside time for myself to take notes on that. Again, I think even if you're not structured, and if you're not that structured, I think you're setting clear expectations of yourself of what you want to get accomplished, at the least. If you don't have to be to the book or to the hour, so to speak, because not everyone works like that. Not everyone's that structured, but I think if you set yourself clear expectations of what you like, even through a checklist of what you want to accomplish each day, then that's, again, giving yourself that that clear expectation of what you're going to do each day. And then even if it's like not structuring what you're doing each day, it's carrying on that checklist until you run out of things to do, then creating a new checklist, and so on and so forth. And that could be a work-related checklist. It could be a general checklist. So you might put on the checklist, I'm going to exercise. If you have weights at home, it might be I'm going to do a certain amount of repetitions and sets. It might be I'm going to go for a bike ride or a run. It might be I'm going to go on a nice walk within my local area. Not driving longer than you do walk. I wouldn't recommend that. I know people have been pulled up for that.
This is a true story. I saw one guy, and he was like doing the delivery service for people. So he got into his car, drove a little bit, got out, went into the house. And I was training on this hill at the time. Went back into his car, drove 2 houses, got out, went back into. I know it's sheer and utter crazy, but likewise, like you said, it's trying to think outside the way of the box to be productive rather than go into your normal thing, what would be jump in the car and drive in this man's possible case.
I think it's emphasizing what you can do rather than what you can't do. So within this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of restrictions of what you can't do. You can't socialize, you can't go out to restaurants, hospitality settings are done, you can't go and watch your favorite football team, but it's emphasizing what you can do. And there's been some brilliant examples that some have gone viral with Captain Tom Moore. Someone I saw recently online was
amazing that
I think it was a gentleman who was paralyzed from the neck down. He paralyzed from the neck, and he used crutches to do like laps. He's inspired by Tom Moore. He used crutches to walk around his garden.
That's amazing.
So I mean, there's great examples like that, and which are popularized by the media, and it's great to see. But I think there's all different types of accomplishments that people can achieve, no matter how big or small each day. But I know the media put emphasis on like the incredible, but I think each day is people being wary and realizing that there's so much that you can get done for all many different reasons as well. So it could be towards your work, but it's also for you as well, for you and for the people you're isolated with. It's no matter how big or small, you don't have to be doing ridiculous 5k times. I've seen people doing like near 20 minutes for a 5k or something like that, which for an average person is ridiculous. And then people, this is not everyone, but I have heard the stories of people making up kind of things of what they like, making up accomplishments just for like kind of that social media affirmation. And it's quite sad to see, really, because that the pressure, they feel that much pressure to do something like that rather than doing it for social media and other people rather than doing things for themselves. This is only a small minority of people doing it, but it's just whatever you do, you've got to do for yourself, especially
definitely
during this time.
The next question we're going to talk about, and it's going to be more prominent as we leave the lockdown. Many of the economists reckon we're going to end up in a recession, and the real question really is, how can, as a student or someone within sports psychology, how can they adapt to this up and coming world?
I think that's a very tough question because you don't know what's coming. You don't know what level of government intervention is going to come forward, and there's no one blanket approach to it. It's difficult, and I try and kind of steer away from what's coming towards what's happening now, as I've been talking about. Because otherwise you're just all over the place if you're thinking about what is or isn't going to happen. You can only respond to what's happening now.
So really, then the question I could ask is, what trends are you finding within work as sports psychology, or the skills you're learning now that could then help you once we're in recession or outside of the lockdown?
The best things I see from people, these not necessarily people who are active on social media, but I think one skill that I've always felt that I've been good at is kind of, and it's not nagging people, but it's asking questions, and it's making inquiries.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to send experts emails or tweets asking about something, being inquisitive, being kind of creative, being very kind of curious, being curious and wanting to learn. I think no matter what circumstances, if you're curious and you don't have any kind of restrictions in your mind about what you feel you can and can't do, no kind of concerns about reaching out to someone or asking a stupid question. That used to be a concern of mine. Whether it's at conferences or whether it's on Twitter, I'd be if I was responding to someone who I know is an expert in the field, I'd be okay, right. I'd kind of overthink things. I would think about, I need to say something which is worth their time. That we learn at our own rates. You're asking a question which, of course, may be simple to them, but to you, it's new knowledge. So I think being curious, reaching out to things, webinars, and different development points. I think the Open Uni were actually allowing people to do some modules for free. I can't remember which modules they were, but I did see it advertised.
They're offering free courses as well. There's I believe the US version, Coursia's got doing something very similar at the moment.
Yeah.
There are also some conferences becoming e-conferences, and they're going online. So Arsenal's very own sports science conference has gone online, and they had that a couple of weeks ago. So I believe that was more for the academy football players to give themselves something to do as well this time and do a bit of learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely engagement with that. I think if you have a kind of like network amongst you, if you like, even if it's formed on Twitter, it's a group of curious minds who are wanting to learn, who are at the same stage, connect with them, speak with them, learn from them. Usually that's what networking events is all about. But during these times, even if it's reaching out to someone that's very seeing something they're sharing, so that's really interesting, I'd be eager to learn more. Just kind of again, that kind of curiosity, and that kind of going in with a kind of no fear attitude almost to learning. And yeah, I think that's my best piece of advice, is to be curious, is to seek out opportunities. If you're really motivated about something and very kind of driven and interested in the topic, then pursue it. Whatever form of sports psychology or psychology that is. If you have the capabilities to buy books, there's a lot of ebooks. If you're at an institution, there'll be a lot of ebooks available. I think a lot of libraries will be doing that, or making a move to making kind of ebooks available where possible.
I know there's a few of them. Few authors are releasing. Okay, it's for product placement reasons as a loss leader, but they're giving out their books free of charge in very rare circumstances. So there are, or chapters of them free anyway. So there are opportunities for that way.
There's a lot of journals that are beginning to be, I mean, there's different types of open access. There's, I think there's like a green and gold level, which is kind of different intricacies and how open access works. But there's a lot of journals which are available on Google. Well, Google Scholar being quite a main one. If you're not in an institution, to one of the main ones to go to. And then there's also there's like the EBSCO database, which is a good open access one.
That's a good one.
There's a few psychology ones as well, psych articles. I'm doing a systematic review at the moment, so I should know a few of them. But there's definitely a few opportunities there, absolutely. So yeah, I think I've just been repeating the same thing, but there's opportunities out there. I know Dr. Mike Rotherham from the EIS has been doing a few. Well, I think it might have been booked up by now, but I know it's quite popular. But he's for quite a few students, he's sharing his expertise and is doing a few programs. And there'll always be programs like that not necessarily from him, but there'll be people who are sharing their podcasts. So obviously, we'll plug our own podcast there, the DSEP Northern Applied Hub. But there's also the Sports Psych Network. There's a new podcast, I think, called A Slice of Pie by Peter Jacks. Peter, sorry, I think his name. I know who I'm thinking of. A Slice of Pie, which is a good podcast, good sports psych podcast.
What a great name!
Yeah, he is. Yeah, no, he's really good. I met him at DSEP. He's done a very good job with getting people on the podcast there. And so just doing things to advance your knowledge, and that could be through podcasts, it could be through webinars, for YouTube videos. Equally as well as seeking out opportunities, looking after yourself, like doing things that you find you enjoy, you find fun, with other people where you can, if you're isolated with them. Then that's my golden nuggets, so to speak.
I think there's one thing we could say as well, that with these podcasts and opportunities like that, there may be an opportunity to work in those sectors, or to earn money potentially, let's say ethically, HCPC wise, from these opportunities that you partake in now.
Yeah, I think you never really know, don't you? It's
no, yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, that's what I mean. If you give an opportunity a go, you never really know where it can lead. So why not give it a go? Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'm talking from our own experiences of doing the podcast, we've definitely had some sort of traction and interest through people, which we didn't necessarily feel we might get. So, and I obviously know yourself, Adam, through your work with you're doing with your own projects. It's you're quite successful with that, and you're always improving. So it's I'll do the plug for you, immersive sports science, with all the work you're doing over there. It's really just trying things out, and it reminds me back to when my earlier point when I mentioned about failing in football, and they just took me over to badminton. And I remember saying, but badminton's not football. And they say, well, you never know. And from badminton, I've played the sport, engaged in the sport. I got involved with so many opportunities through that, and through those experiences kind of advanced me into sports psychology. So you never really know unless you try, really. So that's very vague but just be curious, be inquisitive, be experimental with things that may be outside your comfort zone, and if you keep that attitude up, you'll definitely go far. I have no doubt about it.
That's quite pertinent points you've raised there, and pertinent tips. If you're talking about tips and that, if you're receiving any value from this YouTube video, then why don't you subscribe down below, comment how you feel about it, and more specifically, from what Richard said, what structures have you set yourself during this lockdown, and what potential routines are you putting into place? Are you putting routines into place? And tell us, are they being successful? Are they not successful? Let's start a conversation down below in the comments section. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of talk about psychology, in particular around mental health in because of the lockdown. But what I would really like to know is, what is sports psychology's role at the moment during this lockdown?
I think it's, especially during circumstances and conditions placed upon by the pandemic, it's very important to keep connections and encourage connections, I think, from the sports psychologist's part. So more often or not, sports psychologists would be working kind of not necessarily with athletes, so to speak, but they would be working with coaches. Sometimes they do work one-to-one with athletes, but I think
we really need to highlight sport and exercise psychology rather than just sports psychology. I made a bit of a boo-boo there saying just sports.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's understandable to have a focus on performance sport. I think obviously everything's context. I think exercise psychologists definitely have a part in encouraging things that can be done to participate in sport, and to also replace the feelings kind of missing from sport and exercise. To be fair, even without the exercise psychologist interventions, I think a lot of signposting is done, I think, by psychologists to resources, to trustworthy resources. So, for example, I'm not saying that every exercise psychologist believes in his work, but an exercise psychologist might say to people, engage with Joe Wicks's classes, for example, that he does on his YouTube channel. That could be an example. I know sports psychologists working within performance sport will definitely be making sure what they can do from a kind of holistic perspective to keep, whether from a team sport, for example, to keep their teams kind of connected and concentrated and kind of prepared. So I know a lot of football teams are kind of, they're keeping connected through like Zoom calls and like group meetings and everything, and just kind of keeping connected in kind of their exercises they do. From an individual level, it's very important to keep, for I think a lot of, from an individual sport level, I think there'll be a bit more intervention from a sports psychologist, I think, in regard to keeping connected. So they might kind of be kind of might be that level of welfare support. They might be working with the coaches and the athletes to kind of discuss action plans, or to discuss what they can do to replace training, for example. So I think a lot of kind of that environmental intervention. So sports psychologists be helping coaches in kind of implementing like home programs, in kind of helping in working multidisciplinary with all the different types of coaches as well. In order, I think psychologists will be playing quite a big part in kind of the service delivery of a lot of performance sports and how this is executed, working with lifestyle support, working with all the different types of coaches. And I think keeping an eye on people's well-being during this time as well, and kind of monitoring it through all the different means of collecting data. I think during this time, sport and exercise psychologists have different roles, but also just as kind of as we talked about, that vital cog in making everything tick and making everything function effectively. I think in responding to any kind of stresses, whether on an individual or kind of environmental level, I think I know other trainees that will be on the stream will be able to give a bit more detailed answer than this, but there's a lot of potential for practitioners to kind of influence the training and performance, and also well-being of all the athletes, coaches, and support staff that they work with on the front lines.
No, I think that was really good, really in-depth answer there, Richard. Looking at potentially your own development, what do you want to improve in your practice for future? What focuses are you looking at mainly?
So at the moment, as I've mentioned, I'm a PhD student. So I think I'm looking at ways of being innovative and getting my research out there. So at the moment, I've actually had before this stream, I had a webinar with The Conversation, who if some of you heard, they do a lot. They are kind of like a interaction between journalists and academics and kind of getting news articles out there. So I've done they integrate kind of journalism and academics. So basically, journalists will publish articles which is co-created by themselves and also by the academics. So you can find it on Facebook and Twitter or theconversation.co.uk. But
so is that to get more up to date and accurate information regarding science within media?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it was very impressed me. So I know I want to work towards. One thing I've always been big on anyway, but one thing I want to improve is having that kind of connection and that ability to write to different audiences. So I know I can speak to different audiences, and I've always been good at when I spoke with people explaining kind of complicated ideas in the more layman's terms. But in regards to writing, there's different writing styles of how you write to a general public than how you write academically. And it was interesting. I have seen some, because what you do with the conversation, you send in pictures of your ideas of articles. I've seen a lot of academics turned down for writing academically, for writing the purpose of this is blah, 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 hypotheses, research questions, blah, 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 blah. No, there's no place for that in when you write a article or blog. There's no place for that kind of writing, because you need to write in a language that's understood by everyone. Obviously, you're not necessarily dumbing things down, but you're writing in language which is kind of accessible and readable almost, and not kind of mundane and boring, which academic writing admittedly can be. So yeah, that's one of my aims, is to kind of make my research accessible. I'm also working towards my applied practice accreditation. So with the current circumstances, working my way around that and being able to start my training whenever I can will be quite an important aim of coming towards the end of my Open University module. So if anyone on the basis pathway ever wants to discuss what they have to do and what the Open Uni module is about, then more than happy to share my experience there.
Just don't send your dissertation through to him.
Say again.
Just don't send your dissertation through the post to him.
Oh yeah. No, definitely not. Please no. So those are my imminent aims. I'm waiting upon seeing if I get funding for some of my PhD. So fingers crossed for that. I'm just looking to keep pursuing the three main pillars in sport and exercise psychology for me, which is teaching or pedagogy. So I'm working with my students and providing them support when I can. And then also my research and my PhD, and just keep plugging along with that. About 2 or 3 months in now, I've got my what we call my confirmation of registration, which is kind of your first milestone in the PhD. It's almost like a mini Viva. So I have that coming up within the next month. But then also, as I mentioned, just getting started on my applied accreditation, fingers crossed, within the next few months to a year. So lots to look forward to. And
fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah.
What areas within your, obviously you've just started working in towards your PhD and into research itself. From that experience you have gained, what areas do you believe that research sports psychology research and sport exercise research needs to improve?
Okay. So that's good timing. I think what generally always needs to be improved within academia is impact. Kind of the different ways you can make impacts, how innovative, how the populations you're appealing to, whether you can be more widespread in who your findings are appealing to. I think that kind of diversity in kind of your research findings is really important. I always feel that's where research can always improve on. I think generally collaboration and connection with other scholars, kind of being transparent and sharing your findings, and it can understandably be a competitive world out there. So any time there are to collaborate and to work with the discipline, it's always very important.
I imagine that's especially so with individuals who research may differ because they stand on different points regarding that particular type of literature.
Yeah, and I think that's to be encouraged as well, because people are always going to take different theoretical positions. And I think that fuels the debate. And I think there should be no harm in being wrong. I think we need to remove that fear in research of being wrong, or of there even being a right or a wrong. There's just being a position which has more research evidence or more support for. Especially in social sciences, as I'm sure a lot of people know, it's not as black and white. I think that's who was I speaking to?
So much nuance and context involved with science.
In sports science as well, because sport and exercise science does integrate some of hard science and also soft science as well. So it's that integration and understanding as well. I think within the social sciences, what we can always look to improve is there's always a bit of a political kind of landscape of research, which I'm slowly beginning to learn about now. And I'm sure my position may be different in years to come on this.
It's something that Chris Rowley mentions a lot about, those micro politics.
Yeah, he does. And he talks about applied practice. And I think when talking about that kind of political landscape from a research perspective, I understand the kind of different stances and why people do certain things, but I'm always one for kind of collaboration and for openness and transparency. I know there's always going to be barriers towards that in regards to who you can trust and who may or may not take advantage of you. That's a very cynical way of looking at it, but I think as kind of like a freshman almost to the research landscape, looking to publish hopefully within the next year, or a few publications within the next year. I just hope that's the positive aspects are really highlighted and kind of accentuated of when people do work together. So I'm always a big fan of when people write kind of commentaries and responses, but in an open way, saying so the best commentaries I've read, there's sometimes it does come across quite, we wholeheartedly disagree with you, blah blah blah, but the best written ones I've seen have been like when people are saying we really feel that your work is a very added value, like adds a lot of contribution to the literature. Our commentary on this is we would like this to be repeated, blah 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 blah, on this level. So I think it's just collaboration and kind of working together within the discipline to advance the field and to advance the application to the real world. I think I'm repeating what I was saying, but yeah, just kind of that eagerness to work together in order to reach a common goal, which is I guess we all have our own personal goals, but reaching a common goal of kind of advancing the field and also having that kind of research to practice kind of link as well, which is very important.
So you're probably going to guess what I'm going to ask now. You are a little birdie told me you are a big Doctor Who fan.
Oh, goodness. I don't know who told you that, but yeah, I do like my Doctor Who, yeah.
The question I'm going to ask is, if you had a TARDIS and you could go back in time to meet your former self, I know that breaks so many of the Doctor Who lore, although she or he's done it all the time in that program, but if you could go back to your...
just one geeky reference for me to add there. I'm always a big fan of the Avengers as well. I always like their theories on time travel, just to say. So it doesn't quite work like Back to the Future. Like if you go back to the past, that past becomes your future. Just saying. So it's fine.
Yeah.
All right, geek mode out of the way. You were saying.
Well, we will support any form of time travel, or anyone mentioning time travel. Yeah, going to be some conspiracy theories now on here. So if you could go back in time and meet your former self, what advice or what would you change?
Can't believe this. I created this question ages ago.
Yep, and it's coming back to haunt you.
Oh, goodness.
You love this question, really.
Yeah, I've never thought about it myself. I think I would, in a more specific way than what I'm going to say now, I would tell myself to trust the process and be curious, and just to keep, just to embrace failure and just learn from it. I'm sure there'll be a few rejections I may have to deal with coming in the future, but I think it's just basically always looking forward, always looking to see where I could advance, and if things aren't going my way, then just to kind of not necessarily ruminate about it, but just to think about what I can take from the experience, how I can move forward with it, how I can best regulate as well. So I think in the past, it's taken me a bit of learning to realize how to regulate and best take the most from certain situations. So I think if I had to go back in time and slap myself around the face with a fish and tell myself I'm stupid, I tell myself that I wouldn't break the rules of time travel by telling them that everything's going to be okay, but I would tell themselves just to trust your skills and trust your capabilities in going forward, and to go with an attitude of being curious, as I've mentioned already, being curious in everything that's I come across. And I think in some way kind of reassure myself that you will pull through everything. Not because of the hindsight that you will, but with the attitude of you can take all these challenges on that come up in your career. I would certainly, if I was to choose a time point, I would go back into that gap between my master's and my PhD. I would reassure myself that everything that you just got to keep plugging in there, because there were times where I was really wanting to kind of give up, so to speak, because of all the rejections, and it was a lot to take. So I would have definitely gone back to that time period and told myself to hang on in there, to keep being curious and doing what I can do. And I think with that hindsight, for whatever the challenges I have coming forward, going forward, I'm going to attempt to take that approach. And if it doesn't work going forward, then I'll reflect on that and I'll refine that. But yeah, I don't think I'll go much wrong with that kind of attitude, hopefully.
What advice would you give up and coming, basically people who would want to follow in your footsteps regarding research?
Connections, firstly. I think is seeking, if you have a research idea that you want to pursue as a PhD, you need to kind of think about the right people to supervise you. So my supervisors are world-renowned researchers within their field. So I have Dr. Faye Didymus as well as my lead supervisor, who's a world-renowned researcher in coping and well-being and sports psychology specifically. Then Dr. Tony Williams, who's a very world-renowned qualitative researcher, specifically working a lot with physical activity and exercise psychology. So those two supervisors I work extremely well with, because we have a good understanding of each other, and they just give the best advice when I need it. I've been very lucky to have those supervisors. I know not all PhD research students have supervisors they see eye to eye with. So I think if you're going down the route of a self-funded, well, we'll start with self-funded, you have a research idea you want to propose somewhere, finding the right institution that you'll be confident will be able to support you, finding the right institution with the right suitable people who could supervise you. There's no point if you're at a current institution, just say, I'm going to do a PhD on this, and this said person is going to support me, because I think they need to have the right knowledge and the right background, and they need to be the kind of right person that you'll be able to work with. And that same goes to when you do your training accreditation, is tracking down the right kinds of supervisor. It's not always possible, I know, but in regards to knowing people, so you never really know. So I think that's where kind of having those initial first meetings with a supervisor or prospective supervisor to see if you would work well together. I think, and that's the same goes with research. If you want to pitch your idea, you'll speak to someone before applying through the university. Speak to someone, see if they've got similar ideas to you. So when I did apply for my self-funded PhD, that's exactly the process I went through with Dr. Faye Didymus. We talked about my ideas and how we could advance this. She told me where I could go and develop my idea, and then we both almost work together in kind of getting an application together. So so it's finding the right people, I think, to kind of help you with your research. The research skills you will develop, if you're at the right institution, you have some sort of training program not all institutions have this, but Leeds Beckett I know do, and I know Bradford do. And I know, I think Salford and York do as well, is having the right research programs that you're on to which will support you. So there's a number of things you need to take into consideration with that. And I think leading up to it as well, there's always like funded opportunities as well. Sometimes they're a bit sparse, but there will be funded opportunities. And even as a self-funded student, if you start self-funded, there's ways in which you can access pots and apply for grants to get, and also get loans from somewhere to support you. So there's different things that you can take into consideration, whether it's self-funded, part-funded, or full-funded. And it's just being confident in your ability, in your current abilities, and knowing that you are confident enough that you will seek to develop. Definitely do not go in with an attitude. You'll slowly know, like the more you learn, the less you know. That's what I've been learning on PhDs. Like the more I know, and I think, oh wow, I know this amount of knowledge and stuff. This is amazing. And then you start to think there's so much more out there that needs to be explored. And when you have that attitude, you start to really see the context of your PhD. And that was kind of where I had a eureka moment recently through reading the organizational psychology book. Through reading that, I really started to see the context of my PhD and where future work could go towards, and it just really make you feel confident, especially when I think one of the most stressful things for PhD researchers is when someone publishes something that's similar to their work. You're kind of like, oh no, I've got to change my work. And I used to be anxious about that. I'd see people publish things and I'll be like, oh no, I'm really worried now. But now I'm just thinking, great, then I could advance upon it, or read their work and see where needs be, if they're meeting any of my guidelines at all, if they've addressed anything that's that still, if they haven't addressed anything that I'm addressing, for example. So there's a lot of things from a research perspective you can take into account, but I think connections and the right people to support you along the way is really important. And I've been quite fortunate to not only have some good supervisors, but have a good line manager as well at Leeds Beckett, who supports me and helps me with opportunities. And if all things goes well, and I organise a good supervisor, I get the supervisor I want for my accreditation, then I will be in a very, very good place. I've no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about what you know and what you don't know. You hear famous scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about that kind of. When you listen to him talk, it's like, oh God, I don't really know anything. I thought you end up asking more questions than what you have answers.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people out there who, the smartest people I come across are people who they do know a lot about things, but they're always very curious and they're always very open to people's interpretations. And I think, it always really astonishes me when I come across people like that. People who, even if they know a lot more than other people, they're still very encouraging. They're still very like, oh, I will inform you about this and we can have a discussion about it. And then I can open your eyes to my way of seeing things, but also open my eyes to your way of seeing things as well. And that's why I like teaching so much. That's why I want to get involved with teaching, because then I won't necessarily always feel that I'm teaching the students. I will feel I'll learn things from them as well through the questions they ask. They might ask a question which makes me think differently. I think that's why I'm always one who wants to integrate teaching, practice, and research. I think that's very crucial. No, absolutely.
It's like with the famous quote by Socrates. Although you got to take this within its context. A clever person has something to say, whereas someone who maybe not so clever has to say something.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of links back with kind of Socratic reasoning and kind of how you work with people, and you can go down talking about the humanistic kind of Carl Rogerian kind of viewpoint of working with people. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think helping others to construct their new interpretations of knowledge and reality is, I think, well, for me, it's from my perspective, I guess, a very qualitative, interpretivist, constructivist approach. It's kind of my way of thinking, anyways.
So thank you, Richard, for joining in today's live stream of this coronavirus special live stream. We're hoping to get a few more out to you guys. A quick plug really to look at the DSEP Northern Applied Hub's Twitter page and Facebook pages, where you would find more information about our own activities. The podcast, the Talking Psych podcast, which Richard and I host or help produce. Also, likewise, Richard, do you have any final plugs or comments?
I think you've very much summarized a lot of it, Adam, so thank you. I think, like I said at the start, there's a lot more experienced people out there, and I'm looking forward to the next few streams that Adam conducts with all of our guests coming up. So I hope I've given a bit of insight to people, or a bit of my experiences, and looking very much forward to getting all our future guests involved with the stream. I'm sure Adam will do a good job of mixing this into a podcast, I'm sure. But then, as Adam's mentioned, our plugs for the DSEP Northern Applied Hub. We've got our Twitter handles and Instagram handles will be linked below. Very happy to follow up on any of what's said in the comments. I'm sure we'll be tracking the comments, and if needs be, my details are quite linked, are quite closely linked to the DSEP Northern Applied Hub as well. So you'll be able to access or contact me if you want to discuss things further, especially about basis SEPA, about getting into a PhD and so on and so forth. But no, thank you again, Adam, for hosting me and for asking some very very good questions that definitely put me on the spot. So I'm looking forward to not only seeing the final product, but of listening to other people's experiences through the stream too. So thank you, Adam. Where
can people find you?
Oh yeah, so I'm allowed to plug my stuff. Good. So my Twitter is at richsimpson_95. I guess for most intents and purposes, that will be the best way of contacting me. I'm trying to think if I've got anything else to plug. Yeah, I think that's the main bits. Very accessible through my Twitter, through a direct message or anything. So that's my plugs, Adam. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
You're welcome. Likewise, guys, if you could subscribe down below, that would really help out the DSEP Northern Hub a lot. Likewise, all the resources or anything we mentioned, we will note down below. And likewise, what structures, as we mentioned before, what structures have you set in place during this lockdown? And what routines have you put in place? Have they worked? Have they not worked? Let us know down below in the comments section. I hope you guys are okay, and I hope you guys stay safe, and more importantly, stay at home. This is our coronavirus stream, and we will see you in the next one.